And we're live. We're live with Isabella Margara. This is a week after the Pendance Film Festival now, but we had strange thing in North America where we have a time shift that happens here, which I don't understand why it doesn't happen everywhere in the world at the same time, but it doesn't happen in Europe. And long story short, 7 o'clock became 6 o'clock, and we missed our Q&A. But I'm so happy that we have her here, and she's graciously volunteered to come on and discuss her film. Isabella, nice to have you.
It's nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
It's our pleasure. And your film, it's an incredible film. I would like to ask you many questions about it, of course, but first, if you can, if you can tell us a little bit about the Buddhist philosophy behind your film, and also like how you came drawn to exploring the subject of time.
Right. So there is no, I wouldn't call it a Buddhist philosophy behind my film. I came across a Buddhist parable by accident, and I decided to include it at the beginning of the film. So this is a parable that says basically that that it's very difficult and very rare to be reincarnated as a human being at some point in the future. So that was the idea of the parable. And I just came across this parable by accident. Although I would say ever since I got involved with acting, and I met some people that I really admired, like Yoshi Oida, who is one of the he was a theater no actor from Japan, who later on moved to France and was part of the Peter Brook crew, and some other theater directors that have worked in the East. So I would say that ever since I got involved with acting and I met these people, I was drawn to this more Eastern approach to not only to making art, but to a way of living that I would say that has a more this slower and more the slower rhythm and what we call more ritual theater, let's say. So that was my, let's say that was my only true connection to this Buddhist parable. But other than that, it was just a parable that made sense with what I wanted to say in the film. But I don't have a personal, let's say, connection to the Buddhist religion. I have never practiced it, if that's what you're asking. The true trigger of the story was a painting that I saw at some point, and I saw this painting in Prague, and that was a painting at the Museum of Modern Art in Prague. And that painting was showing a man and a woman standing in an elevator, and the woman was looking very terrified and very, she looked extremely frightened, but at the same time she was very well off. She looked quite rich, let's say, and she was holding her clutch, her handbag very tight on her chest. So she was very defensive. And at the same time, in the elevator, there was a man who was wearing a worker's outfit, and he seemed much more relaxed next to her, not really paying any attention to her. And at the background, there were some skyscrapers of the city, and the title of the painting was called Civilization. And this really caught my eye, and I was thinking, why are these people in there, and why? Basically, I was caught off guard with the title. I was really impressed with the title Civilization. I thought, why is this painting called Civilization?
Hmm.
So I think that was the trigger of the film, the thought behind the film. So the starting point. And sorry, the second part of your question, what was it?
I forgot.
You
Well,
forgot.
I mean, well, effectively,
But
like
yes.
I think to hone in on this, the Buddhist parable that you talked about,
Mm,
to clarify for anyone who hasn't watched the film, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah.
So effectively, there's a turtle who comes up for air every 100 years, correct?
Yes.
And then there's a wreath somewhere in the ocean, right? And effectively, the parable is that the odds of that turtle taking a breath and coming up into that wreath are the
Mm.
same odds that a human being has of being reincarnated into a human being,
Yes.
correct?
So basically, coming back as a human at some point in a future life. Yes.
Right.
What? Yes.
So I thought that was really fascinating, and you know, of course, like most of your film takes place in this elevator. Of course, it starts outside the elevator and it ends
Yeah.
outside the elevator, but the vast majority of it is effectively,
Is in the,
as the
yeah.
painting describes, it's two
Yeah.
people, one terrified, one terrifying, and they're in this elevator. Um, so not to gloss over the first question, but really the merging of these two ideas, really. Number one being what is civilization, and then it seems to me, at least, that your film is a merger of Western and Eastern thoughts. Is that an accurate
um,
way of describing it?
um, okay. So the film obviously has to do with time, and the film somehow obviously comments in a way. I think I'm not interpreting the film. I'm hoping I'm not interpreting it, because it's a film that I know that it has many interpretations depending on who watches it. But definitely, I think I'm stating the obvious when I'm saying that the film comments on on time, on how we perceive time in the Western world with all our neuroses,
Mm,
and with our preset, let's say, steps in life.
mm,
And on the other hand, obviously, I comment on the sense of time by using the Buddhist parable from an Eastern point of view as well. That has to do with with, yes, that has to do, as you say, with what you do with your time, basically what you do with your time, and how my personal need to slow down translated into this parable. uh, but yes, I would say that there is definitely a comment on the sense of time from both sides of the East and the West, in a way.
so there's a film you write, there's a film you shoot, and then there's a film you edit. But I think that
Yes.
maybe sometimes lost is that there's a film you reminisce and reflect on. The fourth type of film that hardly anyone ever talks about, which is effectively, an example would be James Cameron today looking back at Titanic in 1997 and
Mm.
wondering, like, what was I thinking at that moment? What was how
Yeah.
much? And I think every time we change where the film is relative to where the artist is, that the film changes in meaning. So two things really have happened, in the world since you made this film. Number
Mm.
one, of course, the pandemic, right? That happened, and how much that probably drastically impacts how differently you might see time. Number two, you're a mom now,
Yes.
right? And it's like one of the difficulties of arranging this Q&A was finding the time, because you clearly have this incredibly demanding task of being a
Mm.
new mom. So
Yeah.
in a weird way, now when you look back on this film, has the meaning changed? Has it amplified?
I think the it took me a long time to define what the meaning of the film is for me. So even when we were deep in pre-production and heading to production, and even I would say even during the editing process, I often questioned, what is it that I'm making now? What am I really, what do I really want to say with this? You know what I mean?
Mm.
It was it is not something that, for me personally, this is my first film. I've just finished editing my second, and I have to say that the process was much different the second time round. But the
Mhm.
first time round for the turtle, it really took me a very long time to figure out that about what I really want to say. And in fact, I would say that sometimes other people highlighted to me things that I figured out, oh, that's really what I wanted to do with this. So yeah, I think that the meaning of the film, for me now, I wouldn't say that it has changed ever since I realized that, as I said, I wanted to edit this particular film the way you have seen it.
Mhm.
That was my, let's say, my statement in a particular question posed during a particular time in my life.
Mm.
That was then, and that was the answer then. Let's say, okay. Now I would not make the same film, because right now, I would right now, 2 years later, I'm a different person, and the questions have changed. So the statement also would have changed as well. So yes, this probably has to do with, also, as you mentioned, with the fact that I'm a new mother. That all of a sudden, um, other things and other ways of approaching the image, an image and a story, have occurred to me as important.
Mm.
The simple question about, would you show this to your child, for example? Would you want your child to watch this thing that you made, which is something that obviously never crossed my mind, like, until about a month ago. Or, how would you want your child to, how would you want to to speak to your child about a certain subject? How would you
Mm.
approach it? Things that never occurred to me before. So yes, as I said, the questions, the time changes, the questions change. So does the artist's point of view as well.
I think the most interesting films usually are exploring questions as
Mm,
opposed to saying something.
yes.
What they say, of course, cannot be controlled and is always very individually subjective. Whatever I bring into the film is what I'm going to project onto the film. Um,
Hmm.
I'll share with you some very interesting notes that we got on the film, if you're
Sure.
curious. Sure.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
one of them was that it was about the prying role of men as like intruders into a woman's space. That was
Okay.
one, right? The other
Okay.
was about him being sort of like the devil and punishing
Okay.
her, right? So there's that other thing. And then the punishment is effectively what she becomes at the end, um,
Oh,
which,
okay.
which
So
which is very
that
interesting, right?
becoming a turtle is a punishment then.
Exactly. And some people said, well, because they
Okay.
basically, I
So
don't know if they slept through the middle of the film or if they didn't pay attention to the dialogue, but they said that because she's running in the beginning and she turns into a turtle, that is effectively like her consequence for rushing through life, that she ends up becoming the slowest, one of the slowest land
oh,
mammals.
all right. Okay.
So
So
so it's
yes.
so
Okay.
it's
Mm,
always interesting to see how different people interpret the
yes.
same work of art, but that interpretation cannot happen if you spoon feed all of the answers, because
Yes.
then the mind doesn't have that space to explore and roam. And I think that it's incredibly rare these days, especially with bigger films and Hollywood films, etc., that anyone have 12 different interpretations of a film? How can you interpret certain films 12 different ways? You can only interpret it one way because every line, every beat is structured for you, and at the end of the day you just have to decide if what they were saying is something you want to hear. But there's not much thought.
Yes.
So I think that that's important, and I think there were a few films at Pendance. I don't even think this is necessarily like one of those films where I would say, oh, it's so difficult to understand. There was a film by Gabriel Herrera from Mexico, Motorcyclist's Happiness. I don't know if you've seen
Okay.
it. Have you seen it?
Yes. Yes. I haven't. I know the title of the film, but I haven't
It
watched
was
it.
a Berlinale, and I mean it's an
Yes.
incredible film. But so many people were like, "What is going on here?" Last
Yeah.
year we had Organisms from Serbia, which made its world premiere. Again, a lot of people were like, "What's going on in this film?" I
Mm.
don't necessarily think that that answer needs to be had. I don't necessarily think that people need to be able to definitively say, okay, this is exactly what happened and this is what everything meant. It's really
Mm.
up to you to decide what things mean to you, and it will always change. And I think that I really appreciate that about this film is that three different people all said they liked the film, but had a completely different reading on what everything meant. So I think that that's really incredible, and the fact that it's your first film, that's even more incredible to know that. I do want to ask more of a filmmaking question, which is
Sure.
about this elevator. Now, I'm
Mm.
often big time proponent um, of limitations being a good thing, and not a bad thing when it
Yeah.
comes to
Yeah.
filmmaking. And so, structurally, in terms of geography of the film, the vast majority of it happens on an elevator, right?
True.
How
Yeah.
does that help?
Well, having a low budget and very few means of production is a blessing and a curse at the same time. So less money means necessarily more creativity if you want to make it work. So you have to find solutions and you have to make it work somehow. You know, some of my most favorite films are films that take place in just one space, in one location. And okay, this is sort of a preview for my next film. This is pretty much what happens with my second film as well. So there is basically one location where everything takes place, but this location transforms and becomes the whole world in a way. So I realized it now after having finished the second film as well, that this is probably for me something more deep and more existential. The fact that wherever you go, whatever you do, you end up essentially essentially there is one space. You know what I mean? There's just one space,
Yeah.
and in this space anything can happen. um it reminds me of something I had read about. There is this very famous writer, Soren Kierkegaard, who is the founder of existentialism. um, and he was a very strange personality, and he had this very strict father who, when he was very young, a very young boy, he didn't let him walk around Copenhagen, which was the town he was born in Europe. But he told him that anything you want to see in Copenhagen, you can find it in your room.
Hmm.
So anything you want to do, you can do it here. And he was taking him by the hand and he was walking him around the room as if they were walking in the town center. So in a way, I find this very close. The story, I find it very close to what I'm trying to do, or what I have tried to do so far with my two films, which is to create a world, the whole world, within a confined space. And obviously, this is something that at the beginning happened because of the initial, let's say, thought was, it was a production difficulties, blah blah blah, etc. But at the same time, this became in the way, and as we went along, I think it became something more conscious and more, it became a decision
Yeah.
on how you can find, how you can, let's say that if you have a surface, there are two ways to and this surface is the world.
Mm.
There are two ways to explore the world. You can either cover the whole surface, but in a superficial level, okay, but cover the whole, all the spots on the surface.
Mm.
And the other way is to stick to one place, one part of the surface, and dig deep there. You know what I mean? So I think that for me, choosing to shoot both my films in one location and creating a world within this location actually became this need to stick to one place and just dig deeper rather than cover superficial levels, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And I think world building is probably, if I would have to articulate one most overlooked part of directing films, world building is definitely it. Because a lot of people think world building means Avatar or Jurassic
Yeah.
Park. It doesn't have to be that big. There is a world within your film, of course. It extends beyond the elevator, it extends inside the elevator. It's a way in which things are lit. And all of this is consistent, right? And I think that a lot of that is just conscious understanding of the world you're building, number two, and then articulation of that world to your actors, and then of course the cohesion between the world you've built on screen with your cinematographer and your set designer and your location scout, and the one you wrote in your script. And as long as those elements are aligned, I think that the audience will feel that this is a coherent thought. This is a coherent place that
Yes.
exists somewhere, right?
I think you used. I think that you used a word that I so often miss in films that I watch, and I think that when it exists, it makes all the difference. And it's the word coherence. I
Mm.
think you need to be consistent to all the elements of the film if you want. Well, if you have a vision that you want that you want to make sense somehow. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think consistency and coherence is the key word that you used.
I don't know if you've seen Aria. Have you seen the Greek film Aria,
Yes,
2007?
yeah, I
You
have.
have, right?
Yes,
Okay, so
yeah,
Mircini Aristides, like this was a film that we selected to
yeah.
Pendance in
Mm,
2019, and
okay.
that's an incredible film and one that is
Mm,
completely different than your film, right?
yes.
Fake News. Have you seen? Uh,
Yes, I have watched fake news as well.
Another
Yes.
film we programmed,
Yeah.
right? So we programmed
Yeah.
a lot of
Right.
Greek, we've programmed a lot of Greek films in the past, right? And
Good for
it seems like we
you.
always get one good one every single year, if not two. Sometimes we get lucky and we get two.
Mm,
And what I find is like, how different is your film than Fake News or Aria? It's so different, right? It's so incredibly different. The
yeah.
cinematic language is different, the tone is different, the ideas are different. However, one thing that ties all three together is world building, in my opinion.
Mm,
The world is
okay.
consistent. In Aria, the world is told through 85 millimeter lens and handheld cameras,
Mm,
and it's told through frantic movement. It's expansive, it's huge. We're in cars, we're in another car, then we're like
mm,
we're on a dock smoking cigarettes. Like, it's big. You're like
yeah.
really going around the city,
Yeah.
right? And in Fake News, it's like the world is pretty much confined to a giant like storage bunker place,
Yes.
right? But the
Yeah.
color, the set design, the actors, all of this thing, as you say, are coherent and cohesive,
Mm,
and they tie everything together. But the camera work is also part of it.
mm,
The sound design, the music, the actual choice of the actors, their wardrobe, everything fits. Because if you remember it, Fake News, if you could just imagine changing the wardrobe to like prehistoric 1800s, garb,
yes.
right? The entire thing breaks apart with one stupid decision to change the
Yeah.
wardrobe of the actors, because people would spend half the film saying, who wears something like this to a thing like
Yes.
this, right? So I
Yes.
think that there's really this is, I think, the role of the director, and part of Pendance this year has been to highlight the role of the editor and the role of the
Mm,
cinematographer and the role of
yeah.
all of the other parts that make a film whole, because it's not necessarily, I think, it's not even remotely intelligent to say that film is simply a director's medium and that's all it is. You know, there's a
Oh, no,
script
no.
writer, and there's such a collaborative process to it. However, the one thing
But
I will say,
I wanted to say here that because this was my first film as a director,
mm,
I made a very conscious decision to work with people
we may have lost you.
and I thought, that at least they will know what they will be doing, so if everything falls apart, I'm going to be the one to blame and not them. So I was very, very lucky to have some extremely, and very highly acclaimed people who worked for this film.
Well, that's also a decision, like I think, it's funny because like on the one hand, I'm saying like directors are not as important as we often think that they are, that there's so
Mm.
many other parts. But in a way, by highlighting that, you actually do see the importance of a director. And one of the things that is so important is the director dictates the tone and also the cohesiveness that we talked about.
Yes, I think
It's all of the moving parts, because if a director decides that the script that they're working with should be shot in a certain way, but then doesn't communicate that to the DOP, and then completely changes the pacing of that in the editing room, right? Like there's sort of like there has to be some sort of thread that the director ties through.
yeah.
And I think that, kudos to you. Number one, there are so many people who work on their first film. I've met so many people. I
Mm.
lecture at film schools here, and so many people there are working on their first, second film. Very rarely do I find a director who is willing to work with really good people on their first film, largely because
It's very
they're afraid.
frightening.
They're afraid,
Yes, it's very
exactly.
frightening.
They're afraid that they won't know what they're doing, that the people who do know what they're doing are just going to really know that they don't know what they're doing. And that fear effectively cripples their project because now nobody knows what they're doing. And I think that whether it's you or whether it's Carlota or whether it's Scott Monahan, who was in a features competition with the Anchorage, a lot of people, who've had really unbelievable success on firsts, first feature, first short, etc., have had this one thing in common. None of them have been afraid to work with people who know more than them. And I think that
Mm,
that's an incredible thing, but it's not common. And things that are not common should
yeah.
be, to some extent at least, commended and celebrated. So congratulations on having the humility and presence of mind to actually do that.
No, thank you. But to be honest, I think that I congratulate my collaborators because, to be honest, it takes courage. From the way I see it, it takes courage if you are someone who's well established in your field. It takes courage to work with someone who is completely a newbie in the field, and because you jeopardize your name, you jeopardize your work. I don't jeopardize anything. I don't have anything to lose because I start from the beginning. But my editor works in feature films and in other short films that have gone to Cannes and to all over the world. My the DOP has worked in more than 50 feature films in Greece, and the actors are some of the more, in my eyes, some of the best actors in Greece at the moment. Andreas, who was the lead actor, he has worked with Yorgos Lanthimos, and he has worked with Theo Angelopoulos in his last film, and Konstantina is one of the most celebrated female actors in the country. So I think from the way I see it, it takes courage for them to accept an invitation from someone who, you have to convince them somehow that although you are new to this, that somehow you know what you're doing. But
I think the
yeah,
fact that
no, I
you
think.
approach them should show them at least that you know what you're doing. Number one.
Mm,
And number two, I'll share with you something that a very incredible DOP said to me when I approached him for my first short film back in
Mm-hmm.
2015 when I had no experience. And by the way, when you say you have no experience, I had zero experience. Like,
Yeah.
not, I was not a PA, I was not a grip, I was nothing ever. I just
I
decided to
haven't
write.
done any. I haven't done any of that either. No.
That's incredible.
That's
So
really
I
risky.
said to him, like, I've got this short script. He read it. He liked it. And then I said, like, I haven't done anything before. So he's just like, look, he's like, I'll sign on, no problem. And I said, can I ask you, like, why? And he said, look, if you're as good as I think you could be, then I'm going to look really smart. And if you're not,
Yeah.
no one is going to see this film anyway, so who cares? And I
Yeah.
think that that's a
That's
really
very good.
good way
Yes,
to
that's a
approach
very good
this.
word. Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, like, that again, like, I understand where you're coming from. I had a long debate. I'm sure Simu Liu, the guy
Sorry,
who Simu Liu, the guy who he's like
I'm
the
not sure.
Marvel, the Asian superhero in Marvel movies, right?
I haven't watched a single Marvel movie in my
Me
life.
neither. Me neither. Me neither. But
So
he's a
guilty.
really big actor in Toronto, and I
Okay.
remember having this debate with him in 2016. I feel
Okay.
silly now, but I was explaining that the actors who just sign up for everything, just say yes to everything, that
Yeah.
those people should be more selective with their projects. And he said, no, that's
Mm.
bullshit. Like, you just do whatever comes up, and you just do it. And if it goes, like, more chances to that a project actually blows up. And I
Yeah.
just really, really kept arguing that he was wrong. Well, now he's like one of the most famous actors in the world. So maybe he was right, but maybe he's wrong. I don't really know. Maybe he's a special thing, but I get what you're saying about, you have a lot, at least in your mind, to lose when you sign up for somebody
Yeah.
who's new. But at the end of the day, as I said, the very fact that you reached out to the people you reached out to, that you had the humility to know that you needed that type of editor, needed those type of
Mm.
actors, that it shows great taste. Number one, I have seen Andreas's work before, and I didn't recognize him right away, but I was like, oh, is that? Oh God. And then he started speaking, and I was like, oh my God, it is. And I haven't, I
Yes.
just think that it takes a great deal of awareness to know that you needed all of the supplemental parts in place. And I think that they probably got that from you as well. So yeah, yeah, I think it's
Oh,
incredible.
we're lucky to have them. I hope they will continue, that we'll continue working together in the future. I think that one of the things that I think that keep me going in anything I do, in cinema or in theater is meetings with people, and if some meetings with certain people reoccur and happen again and again, it means, in my eyes, it means that you're somehow forming a language as well. It means that you're staying, true to some decisions that you made before. So of course this can change and this can
Mm,
evolve without meaning something personal. But keeping a team of people throughout the years,
mm,
uh, I think that that's true for most directors, at least, that having a team that's consistent and the same
yeah.
has to do with creating a certain language as well, a certain identity.
We were talking with Erin Vasilopoulos because her feature
Mm.
Superior was selected to Pendance this year, and we were talking
Mhm.
about the adaptation of the short in 2015, which she had shot in 2014, to the feature, which
Mhm.
premiered at Sundance 2020.
Mhm.
And it was just talking about this working relationship and how it gets richer over time, as you said, develop a
Mhm.
cinematic language with your collaborators. Peter Brunner is a great example. Carlota Pareda is a great example. All of these people are working with actors
Mhm.
second, third time,
Mhm.
and it's interesting because that relationship does get richer. I think I remember a quote from Ben Affleck. He said, "I just hire my friends, and I hope no one
Yeah.
notices. I just keep hiring the same people over and over again. And it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a great thing to be closed off to new people. I think then when fear starts to play into it of being afraid to work with somebody new, I think then that becomes crippling. But if it's
Mm.
just a desire to continue working with people that you work with well, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And in fact, I personally hope that you do get a chance to work with these people again, because it'd be very interesting to see what you'll do on your second time around. Yeah.
Well, you will get to see it. I hope very soon.
Awesome.
We're just finishing post production now, so I'm hoping that next year we will have some news.
Awesome. So, final question is, what are your
Yeah.
plans for this film? Release, online release. What are you doing with it? Is it continuing on the festival circuits? How much longer? All that.
So we're now almost 2 years after the film premiered, and it's been to many great festivals. We've really been in all 5 continents with the film, in more than, I don't know, 25 countries so far, more or more. Obviously, there is more to come from the festival circuit, but I think that obviously after 2 years we're reaching the end of that as well, and we're happy enough to have the film playing. There's a big TV platform in Greece that has decided to distribute the film in Greece and the Balkan region as well. So at the moment, it's part of their program. And for at least another, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, it will be distributed by them. And after that, obviously, there will be an online release at some point, I think near the autumn. Yeah, so that's it for now. We're really happy that for me, what makes me happy is that people from completely different backgrounds, different countries, different cultures, as you said, they've come up and said, how much they reflected on this film. We had women from Morocco saying that this was part of, that this made a great impact to their lives, and women who felt really repressed by, by male figures in their lives, and so I had many different approaches and many different interpretations that I found extremely interesting, and I've been astonished because most of them were not really in my mind and in my expectations when I was shooting this film. So yes, it's been a great journey, and I'm glad that it's been open to people from all over the world, because that means that there is something, at least hopefully, universal about its theme and its approach.
I think there definitely is, and I think you've explored something that was honest and relevant to you. And
Mm.
generally speaking, when you do that, it tends to find an audience that it connects with deeply. So I'm very, very happy that Pendance was able to select it. And I'm wishing you a lot of luck with the continued success of this film. I hope it continues to have a ripple effect. I have found out myself, and with several other, filmmakers that have been selected in the past, that, like for instance, like Piggy, which was selected in 2019. That was a film that played in Spanish television. It played festivals all
Yeah.
around the world. I think it also
Mm.
played Menaki Brothers Film Festival, the Cinematography Film Festival. So it played a lot of incredible film festivals, but then it went online and it has now 9 million views. So it's like,
Yes.
it continues. And film is like it's funny to say this to a new mother, but film is like a child. I've always
Oh, it is.
thought
It
of it,
is.
and it continues
Oh,
to grow into the
I
world.
was saying, now that I was preparing my next film, and there was this coincidence that I literally I finished post production for my second film just a couple of days before I went to labor. And I was saying to all of my friends that I'm carrying twins, because that's how it felt. But one of them, meaning the film, was much more demanding already. So yes, definitely, a film is a child. Yeah.
I think it's really
So,
interesting that so many people reflected. We had this interview with Carlota Pereda, and people were really surprised to find out that she had a 7-year-old daughter.
mm,
Very surprised, because she had made all of these incredible films, including her feature as her child was between the ages of 1 and 7. That her
Yeah.
entire career effectively took off, and she directs for TV and everything. And my girlfriend actually came up to me after the interview and she said, it's kind of incredible. I really didn't imagine that a new mother could do all of that. That really changes the expectations. And I think that that's really incredible when people can do that, especially with film, because it's such a public way. Film is such a public profession. People are hearing
Yes.
about what you're doing and who you are and stuff. So whether you're an
Mm.
actor, whether you're a director, it's in the public spotlight. It's not like an accountant or a lawyer, you know. And I think it's really interesting. And it's like I always tie it back to this parallel of the 100-meter dash. And there was like a subconscious barrier of how long it took to do the 100 meters. And the minute someone broke that, then the next year everyone broke it.
Yes.
It's just changing what is possible, and I think that
Mm.
it's very commendable that you're saying that instead of sitting there and saying, okay, well, I'm 8 months, 9 months pregnant, forget the film, we'll focus on this later, that you still had that desire and the strength, and even the, I don't know what the word is because I'm not a woman, but whatever it is, that the gusto and fire to actually complete it.
Oh, it
That's
saved my
incredible.
life. I have to say, I would say to every woman out there who plans to get pregnant and have a child, make a film. Because it's so easy to lose your mind if you're pregnant, and you have so many expectations and wishes and fears and all these things that make a film. At least film is somehow up to a certain extent it's under your control. The child isn't. So yes, I would
That's
say
really funny.
do it. It's a way to keep your sanity during pregnancy.
If I'm
That's
not
my
mistaken, I think
advice to young women.
Eraserhead. If I'm not mistaken, I
Oh
think
yes, I was thinking
Eraserhead
Razorhead. Yes.
was about anxieties about becoming a parent as well.
Yes.
So I think sometimes, like when you're going through something very tumultuous or life changing, you're right. Make a film. It could be very
Yes.
interesting, and I think that this film was. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
sorry that
you.
it was so late. I wish we could have done it
No.
earlier, but I'm really happy we got to do it now because, I mean, to be honest, I actually slept last night. And if we had done this during the festival, I wouldn't have slept before I spoke to you. So I probably would have been rambling and mumbling more than I did. So that's really good.
No, we make them film on time, so we definitely have to challenge the meaning of time when we do the Q&A as well.
Well,
So
let's
there
just
you
say we
go.
got the Q&A
We
done
were
at the
consistent.
time that it was
Exactly.
meant to be done. So I'm very, very
Exactly.
happy that we were able
Like,
to do this. And thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck.
thank you.
Best of luck and good night. Good
Thank
evening.
you for
Good
good
evening.
evening. Yes,
Yes.
thank you for the invitation, Robert, and your
Our pleasure.
enthusiasm on films. I think it's really inspiring, and you're setting a very, very, very good example for us to keep making them.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's our pleasure, and Pendance is a home for storytellers and for artists, and we are all artists, so we really do. I think we modeled this entire festival on our own experiences with film festivals and going to film
Mm,
festivals, and we made a wish list of 10 things that we always wanted, but maybe we never got or we
mm,
inconsistently got, and then we made a promise 5 years ago that every filmmaker that was going to come into Pendance, whether virtually or live or whatever, was going to get that from us. So I hope that you felt welcomed and that you felt that your film
yes.
was appreciated and taken care of, because we also treat people's films like little babies that we are in charge of,
Yes.
in charge of nurturing. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's watching. I think there's 12, 13, 14 of you right now. That's really
Yeah.
awesome, given that the festival's been over for a week. So thank you so much for sticking with us, and thank you, Isabella.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.